on the Discovery Channel called Naked and Afraid Have in Common with the Dissertation Process. On today's episode, we're going to do something very different than past episodes because I want to talk to you all about the relationship between this particular show that I watch is one of my guilty pleasures called Naked and Afraid and the dissertation process because I find that there's a lot in common and there are a number of lessons that this show can teach us as doctoral students about how to think through and avoid the dangers of going through the dissertation process alone. So if you're someone who's trying to figure out how to navigate this thing, watch today's episode because I'm going to give you a different way to think about this process through a television show that you may or may not watch, but probably after I describe it today, you might actually want to watch it. So definitely tune in. And thank you everybody again for joining this episode of From ABD to PhD Show. I'm your host, Dr. Ramon Goings, founder of Done Dissertation. And at Done Dissertation, we help doctoral students across the world finish their dissertation process in 1 year or less by demystifying everything that has to go through the process. And in today's episode, we're going to talk about the dangers of going through this process alone. And this particular episode of From ABD to PhD Show is sponsored by the Done Dissertation Velocity Group Coaching Program. It's a 4-month coaching program with the goal to help you, the doctoral student, write and defend either your dissertation proposal or final dissertation over the next 4 months. So if you're someone who is interested and want to learn more, go ahead and visit www.velocitydissertation.com. So with that, I want to go ahead and get into today's episode. As always, if you're tuning in on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, wherever you are live or in the replay, let me know who you are and where you're coming from in the comments. And also let me know where you are in your phase of the dissertation process if you're a doctoral student. If you're some of my folks who have their doctorate, let us know what your dissertation was about. So today's episode, we're going to talk about all things the danger of going through this dissertation process alone. What I want to do is give you some context because I know some of you all may or may not watch this show that I'm going to refer to. So I want to give you kind of a quick synopsis, if you will. You can Google it after today's episode or while you're watching, check it out. But it's a show. It's called Naked and Afraid. To be quite honest with you, I don't know how I started watching the show or why, how I got connected to it. I have no idea whatsoever. It's just a matter of something that I just watch. It's very entertaining. And the premise of the show, and Renee and I, we also watch this too. So I got Renee into it, or I can't remember if Renee got me into it. Whichever way, we watched this show. Again, it's one of our guilty pleasures, things that, if you want to do something non-academic related, you just need something to take a load off. Naked and Afraid is the show to watch. So how the show works, it's on the Discovery Channel. And what happens on the show is that typically there are two contestants that are brought together. They don't know each other prior to coming on the show in most cases. And what ends up happening is that, and typically when they're strangers, they also typically are usually one man and one woman that come together. And what ends up happening is that they are placed in some remote island, some remote place. And their whole job is to survive 21 days in the wilderness. And all they have typically, they have no clothes on. Typically, they have like a satchel that they wear that they can carry some items in. Typically, they may have a knife, maybe a pot to hold water in, and sometimes something to start a fire. Typically, it's very minimal things that these contestants have to as a group. And they have to figure out a way to survive in the wilderness. And so how the show goes, depending on which episode and the contestants, sometimes they might be in the desert. Sometimes they might be like in the like not tundra, but they're in like, cold Arctic type temperatures where they're trying to navigate, 30, 40-degree nights. It's a mix. Sometimes they're in like the rainforest. So it's all these different locations, right? And they have to figure out how to survive typically for 21 days. If you're someone who watches it right now, they have now this thing where it's like survival of the fittest kind of thing, where it's every person for themselves, which is crazy. So they're just solo trying to do this. But typically in the group component, they're together and they have to figure out a way to survive. So as you can imagine, they show up, they have 21 days to make it out without tapping out, basically saying, I can't go on anymore to finish out this project and this mission they have together. But the thing is, they have to figure out how to work together. They have to figure out to navigate things. And a lot of times there's a lot of strife on the show, sometimes between contestants, because, they're trying to figure out personality types. And there's one particular character, like, again, I have to give you this context, right, before we get into how this relates to the dissertation. There's one contestant, Gary. Gary gets on my nerves. My last nerve all the time is like, Gary is getting on my nerves. Gary is somebody who thinks he knows everything and then oftentimes makes one simple mistake and he always has to tap out, even though he feels like he's got the best skill set out of everybody, right? And there's people like that when they come together, they're trying to figure out how to find clean water, how to build a shelter, and then how at some point to find some protein, whether they have to go out and hunt whatever it is, they got to figure out how to stay and survive. But what ends up happening is that a lot of times, not all the time, but some cases, one of the two people end up tapping out and say, look, I can't do it. For some folks, sometimes because they haven't had food in a while, they may eat, a lot of times the case, they eat a berry, and I guess the sugar from the berry takes them out. Other times, folks have been getting eaten up by like these like fire ants. Like it's been so many different ways that people have literally tapped out of the show. And one of the things that I find that's really interesting is that when the partner taps, it really puts a lot of pressure on the other partner to finish the mission by themselves. And what we find out, which is interesting and kind of silly about the show, so I don't know why people do this. You got to be kind of crazy to do it. But all they get, they may get paid. I have no idea. But literally, what I see at the end of every episode is they get what's called a PSR rating. And it's basically a rating about how they did on the episode. And as you can imagine, for a group that comes together, when they lose one member, their PSR rating goes down. But what I want you all to start thinking about is that the requirement of these two people when they come together is that they are on a mission to accomplish a goal. And I want to take what I've seen on the show and apply it to the dissertation process, because just like those folks are on a mission, you all are on a mission too to finish and write your dissertation. But a lot of times we don't think about it. And oftentimes we may feel like we want to go through this process by ourselves because we have been taught that we need to be a quote independent scholar. And I want to talk about why that is a detriment to your process and some things and ways to think differently about that and really get down deep into the dangers of going through the process alone. Just like when those two people come together on Naked and Afraid, when one person leaves, it really puts a lot of stress on that other person. And oftentimes that person may not finish the challenge either. And so there's some aspects that you have to consider about why doing something alone that's such a big task, like in their case, going, surviving in the wilderness, but in your case, finishing a dissertation, it's really difficult to do alone. And in this episode, I want to talk about 3 dangers that I want you to consider and think about as you're going through your dissertation process. And I'm hoping that some of these things resonate with you as you're thinking through. So if anything, touches agrees with your spirit, let me know in the comments, because I want to talk about this. I think it's really important for us to consider. So first things first, when we think about the dangers of going through this process, when you're going through your dissertation process alone, you literally block the ability for those who have a specialized skill that you don't possess to help you. So what I want to give the comparison is on the show Naked and Afraid, right? What ends up happening is that throughout the show, typically they pair people together who have different skill sets. And so there may be someone who was an expert hunter. And then there may be someone who's an expert, person who can create shelter and start a fire. They come together. But when they're together, they have a greater chance of surviving, right? But once that person, let's say the hunter is gone, if that person who's by themselves can't develop that skill set and doesn't have that specialized skill set, they don't make it in the show. The same thing I would say goes for your dissertation, right? So when you're going through this process alone, you only have the skills that you possess yourself to rely on, right? And for some of you all, that may be enough to get through the process, right? You may not need any more than the skill set you currently have. However, what I do know is that for some folks, that the skill set you currently have is not often enough. And because of that, what ends up happening is that you benefit from having someone who maybe know the ins and outs and can help you either speed up the process to develop a particular skill set, or can help you move in certain directions where it allows you to continue to use the strengths that you currently have. But what I see with a lot of doctoral students is that when you're going through this process, you have this kind of sometimes our ego that gets in the way. Is like, I got to do this alone. But best believe, folks who finish have a team of some sort. We firmly believe in that. If you came to design your done dissertation, you would know we're all about building the done dissertation team, because you cannot do this thing yourself. And especially if you're watching this video and you have been sitting in the same spot for the last semester, your way has not worked. And once you come to that realization, it's a matter of understanding, like, hey, me being alone on this process is not the best idea. And for some of y'all who may feel like you're not alone, alone does not always mean like you're doing this independently, right? Alone is like you haven't been able to build a community. Alone is that you're ashamed of asking the questions that are in your mind so simple and you're wondering why you don't know the answers to them. These are some things that when you're in a network, in a support like what we provide at Done Dissertation, this is where our clients start to flourish, because they're in an environment where no question is too simple. Ask the question so you get the clarity. A lot of us have tried to go through this process alone, And because you're going through it alone and you don't have the specialized skill set, you're trying to compensate for it. And sometimes you compensate by, a number of ways. Sometimes it's being, overly critical of yourself as you're writing. For some of you all, you overcompensate by not submitting because you're just scared of getting feedback because deep down you don't feel like you know enough because you don't have that skill set. And this is what a lot of what we do with our clients, because our curriculum is structured to help build those skills that you might need to learn the writing strategies and what faculty are looking for. But what I've come to learn is that where coaches are beneficial to you is not just for the literal skill set of writing, but also like the mental aspect of the process. But again, you got to have somebody on your team who has that expertise to kind of show you the ways of what you have going on. So if you don't have that, it's going to be very hard to continue to move through the process by yourself. And so, with that, again, the first danger I want you to consider is that when you go through the process alone, you block the ability for those who have a specialized skill set to help you. And this is going to be really important as you navigate the process. This is essentially why, in the dissertation process, you have a committee. They each have expertise on a particular area. Someone might be the subject matter expert. Someone might have a method expertise. Someone might have, a writing expertise. So you craft your committee in this way. But a lot of you all, sometimes when you've been stuck, you're afraid to go to them, and then you don't seek support because you feel like you shouldn't do that, and you just go through this process alone. When you can have someone kind of help you speed things up and learn the process a lot faster. So if that is something that you understand and you've had as a part of your process, let me know in the comments, because I know somebody has experienced this. And so just let me know if this resonates with you all at all. And so with that, again, we're talking about the dangers of going through the dissertation process alone. And this episode from ABD to PhD show is sponsored by the Done Dissertation Velocity Group Coaching Program. It is a 4-month coaching experience to help you, the doctoral student, write and defend either your dissertation proposal or final dissertation in 4 months. So if you're someone who is interested, please visit www.velocitydissertation.com. If you're on YouTube, LinkedIn, or Facebook, you can click the QR code that's right on the screen in front of you. It'll take you right to the website so you can learn more about our program and go ahead and submit your application. Again, what's standing sometimes in the way of a lot of you all getting the help is you recognizing that, hey, I may benefit for some extra support that can help fast track me through the process. And so, again, for those who are just tuning in, we're talking about and doing a comparison about this show I love to watch, and Renee and I watch, called Naked and Afraid, and how it's related and the lessons learned from that show about the dissertation process. And so with that, I want to talk about the second danger of going through the dissertation process alone. And so what I've come to learn is that when you go through the dissertation alone, it's so much easier to let loneliness, fear, procrastination, and perfectionism seep into your process. Here's why. When you have a community of folks and being able to talk to people, and you're able to have accountability and people checking on you, it lowers that, because one, you don't have enough time to engage in that loneliness. You don't have time to engage in that fear because hey, my accountability partner or my, cohort mate that's in the coaching program is going to be checking on me to make sure that I'm straight. And also the coaches are going to be helping me. So you have people that are going to be checking on you, because I know for a lot of us, when you're going through the dissertation process, it can be very challenging when your chair is not present as you would like for them to be. And what ends up happening in some of the cases, what we continuously hear from clients and prospective clients, is that they are in a situation where their chair is actually phenomenal, but they just can't get on their calendar. So it's not uncommon. I've had folks who are waiting 1 month to get on the calendar of their chair. So it's no fault of their own. So with that, it can be very lonely because you don't have that sense of direction. But during those times, that's when the fear creeps in, and then you get very anxious, or you might just start to, panic when you're sitting to write, because you might feel like, I got one shot to get this writing correct, because my chair is only going to look at this once, and then once they look at it and give me feedback, I won't hear from them for the next 2 months. And it's not fair how it goes, but just on the other side, because I always try to give you both sides in terms of what's happening, because I am a faculty member, so I see that side and have my own doc students. There are certain ebbs and flows of the semester where we are like overloaded with work requests. And so sometimes getting through dissertations and getting feedback is just very difficult, given all the other things in the end of the semester, graduations, wrapping up teaching, grading papers, finishing up. Some people are, doing reviews for journals. All these things are piling up on faculty. And so sometimes on their end, they're very slow in terms of peaks in the semester, particularly at the beginning and end of the semester is when that happens, right? But what I want to say is that in this case, right, on the Naked and Afraid show, what's really sad, Renee and I get so sad, especially when we're like rooting for these two people together, and one person taps out, And sometimes that one person is almost like the person who holds the two together as a partnership. And it's just sad because what ends up happening is that when the one person is alone, you could just see as soon as that person taps out and is like, look, I can't go on. After they leave, they exchange, it's hugs, tears, all sorts of, emotions that happen between the two people. But once that person is, left and there's only one person by themselves, they're looking around like, look, it's just me or me that gets this thing done. And you could just see it does something to their psyche as they go through this, as they do this alone. And what we've come to learn with working with so many doctoral students is that when you're going through this process alone, it impacts your confidence because you don't have anyone to affirm what you're doing. You don't have anyone to say great job, even if it's just a small win, or you don't even have, another person to bounce ideas off of, or just to know that the question that you want to ask that you feel is too simple that you actually can go ask it. But when you're alone, you just feel ashamed. Like you don't want to go to classmates because you don't want to seem like you don't have your stuff together. And a lot of times, what the secret is, I want to let you all know is that your classmate doesn't have it together either. And so sometimes we're doing this whole imposter syndrome thing when none of us have it together, and we're better off just supporting one another. But sometimes that's just the psyche we have to get through. And what ends up happening is that when you're not confident in your work, it shows up not just in like how you present yourself, it shows up in your writing, and then it also shows up in how you interact with your chair and committee. Because what ends up happening is that you end up allowing your chair and committee to dictate a lot of what's happening versus you kind of stepping in and saying, hey, I actually want to do this, and I have a great rationale as to why, and having that exchange versus it all being, your faculty members dictating everything that you do. And so this is something I really want you all to consider and think about. So if this is happening to you, let me know in the comments. And this is the reason why it's a danger of going through this process alone, because we've learned so much from our clients that the secret to getting through the dissertation is not about writing. It's about what's up top here. When we get through and have a clear mindset, it gives you the confidence. And once y'all have the confidence, because a lot of times writing is just a skill set you can develop, but having the confidence to do it is the first step. Once you have the confidence, implementation becomes easy because you have the confidence and you want to be consistent and sit with that. But for a lot of us, we don't get help and we rather just stay quiet because it's comfortable than go ahead and seek help and get the confidence that we need to finish. And if this is you, this is why we tell folks to apply to our program and work with us and get some support, because we know that we can help people get through the process. And so with that, again, the second danger about going through this process alone is that, when you go through it alone and you're trying to do everything by yourself, it's easier for the loneliness, fear to creep in, as well as the lack of confidence. And so with that, we're talking on this episode, the dangers of going through the dissertation process alone. This episode from AVD to PhD show is sponsored by the Done Dissertation Velocity Group Coaching Program. This program has the goal over the next 4 months to help you, the doctoral student, write and defend either your dissertation proposal or final dissertation over the next 4 months. So if you're interested in learning more and to apply, visit www.velocitydissertation.com, or you can scan the QR code that is on the screen if you're watching this on YouTube or LinkedIn or Facebook. So now, what I want to do now is get into the third and final danger of going through the process alone. And that centers around, support. And so what we know about the dissertation process is that when you go through it alone, you don't have anyone to watch your back. So on Naked and Afraid, the show is wild, right? And so one of the things where it's helpful to have a pair is like there are times, and I don't know, sometimes I think it's just the editors, right? I think just the editors playing games with us in terms of the viewers and keeping us watching. But it always seems like at some point in the episode, there's always some like a lion, a tiger, something that passes by the shelter that these folks created. And I don't know, like I said, I think it might just be the editors doing stuff just to keep us engaged. But it keeps me engaged. I'm wondering, is this going to get them? And I remember one time it was like a hippo was around the shelter. It was like some crazy, like large, like pig type animal. Like I've seen so many different things kind of pop up, poisonous snakes. All these things have happened where folks are trying to, just survive in the wilderness. But when folks have a partner, they have people to look out for them. A lot of times in this last episode I watched, they were in this particular water that as they would go through, they had to watch out for crocodiles, right? And so, they had a partner that, could look out and kind of keep an eye out. And in one case, they actually ended up catching a crocodile, and that ended up being their dinner that one particular night because they were able to work as a team, right? They had someone to have their back, and they had a plan about how they were going to attack this animal and, what their plan was, and they executed. But what ends up happening is that for a lot of us, like Naked and Afraid, when they have a partner, they have someone to tell them about the dangers that are ahead. But when they don't have that partner, they're relying just on themselves. And sometimes that can be to your detriment. And similar to the show, when you're going through the dissertation process, you have to, when you have a partner, you have someone who's able to support you, you have a guide, a coach, they're able to help you navigate the waters, even when it's real murky to you and you don't see, the full path ahead. When you have a coach who's been there and can carry you through this thing, they shine a light on all the areas that had you not seen, you would have gotten to the trap. You might have gotten to the trap of sending that email to your chair that would have just blown up your dissertation process. You might have gotten to the trap of, not running a suggestion by your co-chair before you go ahead and execute something. Like, these things really start to matter. And for many of us, we take so long and don't understand the process, and we don't have anyone to guide us, that we make simple mistakes that keep us back. Even mistakes on like how to respond to feedback. That's like one of the first things that we are teaching our our clients, is like, how do you address feedback? Because particularly when you have feedback that conflicts. Because one thing I know, during the dissertation process, you will get feedback from your chair and committee, and sometimes they will have conflict with one another. And for a lot of clients, what it will do is, because you don't have someone to watch your back and kind of tell you how to navigate it, you will get stuck, and then you won't know whose feedback to apply. You'll try to apply both and realize it doesn't make any sense. And then next thing you will do is get extremely frustrated and then throw the project away. And then you'll take a day off, like, hey, I'm gonna come back to it tomorrow. And then tomorrow turns into 6 weeks. We just seen it over and over again for folks who decide to work with us. And literally, one of the things we talk about in our modules, the first module that folks learn in our programs, like, how do I address feedback and what's the actual process? Like, we give people a step-by-step process through addressing simple things as feedback. But this is the advantage of having someone on your side who can help shine a light on the areas that you don't see. And you need someone to have this, your back during the process. But a lot of us, again, have trying to go through this thing by ourselves so long and not knowing what to do, that we just overstep and mess up. And CT2122 says, that's what I did, responded wrong to feedback. Yep. It happens all the time. It just how this thing goes. That's why we teach a lot of our clients how to address that, especially when they conflict. And there's ways to approach the conflict between committee members. But a lot of times, if you don't know, you may misstep, not understanding the politics, and then wonder why things are not going in your favor. And again, this is something you need to think about. And, shout out to Renee for this idea for today's episode, because, we watched the show, but she developed this idea around the naked and afraid concept, because that was like, it made so much sense. Like, when we watched the show, we're like, dang, when the people leave, it's like, oh my God, like they can't figure anything out. But what we do know is that when folks have the support system, when they don't go this process alone, when they have someone who has a specialized skill set to help them, when they have someone who, is able to guide them so that they don't feel lonely and afraid, and then also when they have someone to guide them to just watch out for the dangers that lie ahead, it makes going through the dissertation process so much easier. But all it takes for you all is to make a decision to say, hey, this might be the time I might need help to get the support that I need. Because what I've seen for a lot of students is that who come to work with us is like, hey, I love what you all are doing, but I don't know if I want to invest in myself in that way. And literally what I've seen some people do is that they'll invest in other things that don't bring them the success that they're seeking. But when it comes to something around their dissertation that will give them infinite return, they are quick to balk at it. And a lot of times it's centered around fear of you not being able to think that you can do it, or just fear like, hey, I'm giving this money up. Like, what else do I have to give up as a sacrifice? And like, one thing I do know, if you are stuck, you're going to have to give something up. You definitely have to give up some time. I'm just having a conversation with some folks right now about giving up, time. You might have to be a little more selfish. And so that might give up doing things for other people momentarily, because some of us don't think about, what we're trying to teach you is to take a short-term sacrifice for a long-term success. But a lot of us don't make that investment, don't make that sacrifice in ourselves, because of all these other things that we're thinking about through the process. And it makes absolutely no sense, because you're still paying tuition, regardless if you move forward in your process or not. So why not get some support, invest in yourself so that you can recoup the time back, because time equals money. Literally, if you work with us, we save you a year off of your dissertation process. Calculate in your head, how much dollars in tuition does that save you? Or how much student loan debt does that save you? These are the things that help you. And then not only does it save you on the money in terms of what you put out, but just think about how much a year will help you recoup in terms of your income potential. There's all these things that add up. But for a lot of us, we're so concerned because we are afraid of and we continuously go through this process alone, that we don't get the support that we need. And when you don't get the support that you need, you're into this rut and this cycle of like not doing things, and it just is this perpetual cycle. And at some point, you have to break it. And for some of you all, it might be seeking support and getting help. This is why we offer our programming. You might have seen on our social media posts, like I had a post about why dissertation coaches shouldn't really exist, but it just is the reality. Like, folks are not finishing. Sometimes you don't have the support from your chair, or they are just, overburdened with 20 doc students of their own trying to navigate this thing, and you might be falling through the cracks. And so this is where we come in to help provide you that support, that environment, that scholarly community, so that you recognize that no question that you have is too simple, and that you can do it because you're seeing other people do it in real time. And so this is why I would invite you to, if you're interested in this and learning more, I invite you to apply to work with us in our Velocity Group Coaching Program. You can go to www.velocitydissertation.com to learn more about our program. If you're on Instagram, you can click the link in our bio. It'll take you to our application in our page, so you can learn more about our program. And shout out to Dr. Varela, one of our Velocity coaches, who is on right now on Instagram. But with that, I wanted to wrap up today's episode. Again, we're talking about the dangers of going through the process alone, and we're comparing this to the relationship between the show Naked and Afraid and the dissertation process, of which you all can learn from the show. My only suggestion, now that you've heard me chat about this, if you haven't finished the whole episode, go back and then now go watch Naked and Afraid, the show, and go see what happens when one of the partners has to, leave the show because they got really hurt, or they tapped out for whatever reason. And so as I wrap up, I would love for those who are watching live to drop on any question that you all might have. If you are on live, make sure that you hit the subscribe button. If you're watching this on YouTube, LinkedIn, wherever you are, make sure you add us as a friend. I see most of our folks right now are on YouTube. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so that you know when future episodes are coming out. And we have some fire episodes of office hours with other scholars coming up over the next couple of weeks. You'll start to see those released every Wednesday as well. And so I'll take any questions. And again, thank you all so much for folks who have been tuning in. If you have been tuning in, drop a comment. I can't see them right now. I don't know if this, my software not letting me see your comments, but if you have something, let me know. If not, drop me a DM if you have a question. I'll be more than happy to chat with you about what we're doing at Done Dissertation in the Velocity Group Coaching Program. But I'll leave it up for a minute or so. Any questions, y'all? And make sure that you send this to somebody else too. Don't be selfish. You have the YouTube link. Go ahead and send this off to somebody, a doc student that can get some support, that's trying to figure this out and has gone through this process alone. And I just had this conversation with somebody today. We're just talking about, the importance of like making these short-term sacrifices for the long-term gain, and not lose sight of what the end goal is with this dissertation. For many of us, it's not about the dissertation, right? It's about the end result at the end. It's about what's looking ahead for you at the end of this process. It's about that new job. Is about you fulfilling your purpose by getting this degree. It's about you impacting your community. It's about, you might want to make more money. You might want to pivot careers into consulting, whatever it is. You got into this program for a particular purpose, and sometimes the process can, help you to lose sight of your purpose. And so what we want to do is help you, reclaim your purpose so you can get to the end result of what you got into the program for. While we're going to teach you all the ins and outs of how to write, a lot of this is about how to transform your mind into someone who is ready to be a scholar versus someone who's currently a student. And so with that, I don't see any questions. So I'm going to go ahead and hop off. Again, if you want to apply, make sure that you hit www.velocitydissertation.com. Go ahead and hit the subscribe button on YouTube and send this video out to 1 or 2 friends that that can provide value. And if you are someone that needs help, make sure that you apply to work with us, or send the information to a friend that needs help. A lot of times we can getting emails from spouses like, look, my other spouse has been trying to finish this thing forever. They need help because I'm tired of them looking at this document. And so if that's you, go ahead and get your spouse, fill out the application form, whatever you need to do to help them get the support. Make sure that you tap in with us at velocitydissertation.com. And again, until next week's episode of From ABD to PhD, I will see you all soon.